In this video, I'm going to teach you 10 fundamental CSS concepts that are often overlooked in professional courses. And if you know these concepts, then you'll become a better developer and you'll develop websites that do not break in production. So let's get started and see what these concepts are. Let's say I have this div, and in this div I have one input element. Okay, now on this div I have the styling of width 400 pixel, border 4 pixels, solid blue. Now on this input I have a class named search bar. Here, as you can see, this is the div and this is the input. Now let's say I applied styling to this input box, and here I have a specified width of 100% and padding of 20 pixel. Now what we were expecting, that the width of the inner element, that means the input element, should not go beyond that of the parent. That means it should only go as far as how wide the parent is, but it should not exceed beyond that. Okay, but what's happening here is, here the element is going beyond, and here we have also given padding of 20 pixel. Now what's happening here? And this is like where some beginners get confused. So this is happening because by default CSS uses content box. Now what is content box? In the content box approach, CSS uses this width, padding and border as different entities, and then it combines them together to give you the final size of the element. And that is the reason why here the input element is going beyond that of the parent. That means the width is being treated separately, that is 100%, which is like 400 pixel, and the padding here is 20 pixel on this right side and on the left side. Okay, so now what is happening, that total width, total size of this parent is less than the total size of this input element. That's why it is going beyond that. So this is how the total size of the element is calculated in content box approach. Okay, now whenever you are building a website, just make sure that by default you need to first paste this code and use the border box approach. Okay, in border box approach, what happens, that the size of the element takes into account padding and border. So it's like the border and padding are included within the width of that element. So here, as you can see, the input is not exceeding beyond parent after using this code. Okay, so always make sure that use this line, and whenever you're building projects, this should be the first step you should take. And just make sure that you also want to apply in before and after element, because they are also using content box by default. And once you do that, your issue will be fixed. Now the inner element, input element, is not going beyond the size of the parent, and it is not going beyond that 400 pixel limit that we have specified. Okay, so this is how you can fix layout issues. If you do not use this, input element will go beyond that. Now let's try to understand the concept of margin collapse. So let's say I have heading and paragraph. Here I have given this styling of margin bottom 40 pixel in H1, and I have given a margin top 20 pixel in the paragraph. Now what's happening here is that we should be expecting a gap of 60 pixel between these two. But by default, when elements are block elements, what browser does, browser uses a concept of margin collapse. And in margin collapse, browser uses the highest value of the gap assigned between the elements. So here the margin bottom is 40 pixel and here margin top is 20 pixel. So browser is not going to use this 20 pixel, it is only going to use this 40 pixel, and it is going to assign that gap there. Okay, it is not going to assign you 60 pixels. So it's like the 20 pixel that you have assigned here does not matter, because browser uses the highest value. So if I comment this out, you will see there is no difference on this screen. That means only 40 pixel from the margin bottom is being applied. Okay, so that is what's happening here. So if you apply 80 pixel, what browser does is, it's kind of like you can say it consumes this space that you have specified above, and then it will give you the final output using the maximum value that you have specified in this. Okay, so always try to understand that browser uses this concept of margin collapse whenever you are using the block level elements. And if you want to avoid this approach, which is something that you should, because this is not the right way to give spacing between elements, and this is always hard to maintain, and it's not going to give you the consistent result. So the best approach is to always use flexbox and grid. Let me show you what that means. So let's comment this out and let's move on to this example that I have written here. Now here I have this div, and inside this div I have a h1 paragraph. Okay. Now I'm using flexbox. Now what happens whenever you are using grid or flexbox, you have moved into a different formatting context. And in this formatting concept, the margin collapse concept is not applied. Here you can specify margin bottom and margin top, and browser is take that into account because it's going to give you the space. Now in this situation, margin top and margin bottoms are working. But again, this is not the right approach, because Flexbox already provides you with something called gap property. So you can use the gap property here, and you can use that property, gap property of, let's say, 20 pixel, 30 pixel, whatever space that you want. And once you have specified that specific property, then you can see the gap between those elements. And also make sure that you specify margin 0 and on this title and text classes, okay, so that you can get the consistent result. So you try to use flexbox or grid layout whenever you are designing some kind of sections, so that when it comes to spacing between those elements, you get a consistent result on all screens, and things become better and they do not become difficult to maintain. Okay, so do not use this margin top, margin bottom in all situations. These are really one of the worst ways to give a spacing between elements. Always use a formatting point text such as grid layout or text boxes. Now let's try to understand stacking context. So most of the time when beginners see that some elements are not appearing on the page, they add a random z index and they think that this is going to fix the issue. It is going to show that element on top of the page. But this is not what happens in most of the cases. So let me give you one example. So let's say I have this div, and here I have this top section, which is this. And inside this div, I have a pop-up where z index I have specified 999. Okay. Now below it, I have another box where I have given a class name of box2, and this is the bottom section. Now this is box 1. So let me show you what I mean. In the box 2, I have specified a height of 100 pixel, z index of 2, and in the box 1, I have specified a z index of 1. Now remember that this pop-up is inside box 1, and here we have specified 999. But even after using this number 99999, our pop-up is not appearing. Why it is not appearing? It is because it is a part of an element which has a lower z index as compared to another element which has a higher z index. That means whenever browser applies the z index, it first looks into the stacking context, how that specific element is being stacked against all the other elements, and it looks at the z index of that specific element, and it is going to stack the children of that element according to the relative z index of that parent. Okay, so the number does not matter. What matters is in what context that specific child element is being stacked. In what context we have specified the z index. So here box 2 has higher z index. That means it is going to be above this box 1. Okay. Now this box 1 has lower z index. That means it is going to be lower as compared to the box 2. Now the pop-up is inside box 1. So the pop-up is not going to appear above box 2, no matter what number you have written here. So the best solution is to, first of all, we need to change the stacking context of box 1. That means we need to first increase the z index of box 1, and let's say we are making it to 3. So the moment you made it the z index of 3, it is going to stack above the box 2, and the pop-up will go above that. Okay, so it is now going to appear here. Now let me tell you that this number does not matter. What matters is the stacking context. So here you can write 9, 10, 3, 2, 1, whatever you write, it is going to appear because box 1 is now above this, above all the elements on that specific page. Okay, so stacking context, basically it's all about in what context you have written your child elements, and no matter the z index that you have specified, if the parent element have lower z index, then the child element is not going to kind of like appear on your screen at all. So this is all about z index. Let's say I have this button where I have a class name of button, okay, and I have written subscribe to my channel for more such contents about coding, and I think you should actually do that if you are liking this video so far. So let's try to understand this concept. Most of the time, whenever you are writing a button, many people specify width, a specific width, let's say 200 pixel, 300 pixel, and this is something you should not do, okay. And why that is? Because it's not a responsive width, okay. It is not something that's going to give you a consistent result on all screens. So what we do, we have three options. So let me tell you, the first option is mean content, okay. And what this does is this is going to find the word which is like the longest in terms of like size, and here let's say here subscribe is kind of the has the maximum width, okay. So it is going to take that and then it is going to wrap that button there, okay. And here the button is not looking that nice. So mean content actually like you should use it very carefully in only certain situation, but try to avoid it. Now there is something called max content. Now what max content does is it's going to like take into account the entire text. It is not going to wrap at all. So on this screen, as you can see, the entire button is visible, but the moment I try to reduce the size of the screen, as you can see, it is not wrapping at all. So I am getting this scroll bar, okay. So it is going to go beyond the boundary. It is not going to be responsive again, okay. So the best approach to make the button responsive is to use fit content. A fit content is that whenever the size is like there, the button is going to have a responsive kind of like it is going to show you the entire content, but the moment that space is gone, it is automatically going to resize according to its like size. So as you can see, the button is automatically becoming responsive. So always try to use this fit content whenever you are specifying width for a button, so that it does not break the layout that you have, okay. So this is a very basic concept, and I hope that most of you are already familiar with this concept. Now let me tell you one important observation that I have made about some beginner projects. Most of the time people write media query this way. So they will define the grid layout, they will define one column, and then for different screen sizes they define different columns using media queries, which is not needed, even though this may be correct, but this is not actually needed, because there are already solutions in CSS to write responsive code for your grid layout, okay. So let me show you what exactly I mean. So let's say I have this gallery, and here I am saying grid template column repeat auto fit min max 250 pixel 1 fr. Now what this means? So this means auto fit. When you say auto fit, what you are saying that hey browser, just try to create only the required number of columns and make sure that those columns are not less than 250 pixel, and whatever extra space that is left, then divide those that area equally among the number of columns that you have created, okay. Now what browser is going to do, browser is going to take care of the responsiveness part, because it is going to do all the calculations for you, and you do not even need to write the media query. So it is automatically going to calculate the space needed to create the required number of columns. Now let me tell you that apart from autofill, there is something called autofill. Now autofill create extra number of columns that are not even needed. So always try to use autofit, because it is only going to create required number of columns according to the requirement, according to the number of columns that is needed for that specific responsiveness size, okay. So try to use this approach, because if you are writing this, you have already reduced this 6-7 lines of codes within this one line, okay. And this is really important. Now let's try to understand min, max and clamp functions, okay. So min function actually returns the minimum value out of these two, okay, and this does not set the minimum cap value that you have assigned. this is not going to do that. It is going to return the minimum value. So let's say sometimes what people imagine that this is going to set 300 as the minimum pixel value. So if let's say this is 200 pixel, then this is going to return 200 pixel. It is not going to return 300 pixel. Okay, so just try to understand that whenever you are using min or max, they simply return the min or max value. They do not set a capping. They do not do that at all. Okay, so use them carefully. Only when you understand that they are returning value. They are not setting a limit to what value you are expecting. Okay, but the best way to set a minimum and maximum capping is to use clamp function. Now in clamp function, what you can do, you can define the lowest cap, the highest limit or highest cap, and in between that you have this preferred value. So here I have 5 VW, which means let's say 5% of whatever the viewport I have. If let's say this turns out to be 18 pixel, then it is going to compare with the 24 pixel, and since 18 pixel is less than 24 pixel, then it is going to use this lower value. Otherwise this is going to you can say it is going to be within that range, and if it is beyond that 64 pixel, then it is going to use this. So here you are setting the lowest and highest ceiling to your value. So always use this clamp, and whenever you're using mean and max, just keep this in mind that these are just calculating mean and max values, not setting any kind of limit to the values that you are expecting. Many people are not familiar that CSS has property, and that is something that you can use to select elements anywhere on the document, and then you can apply some classes. Now let me tell you that previously, when this has property was not developed, developers used to use JavaScript to apply a specific class according to the conditions. So let's say, for example, here we want the background to change to some color the moment a user clicks on this checkbox, and for that we are writing this function here. Okay, now this is something kind of become messy if you have a long condition to apply classes, etc. But the CSS has property has actually helped us reduce this codes. Okay, so for example, you can simply get rid of these things, and you can get rid of this on toggle function, and you can simply use this has property and check if the input box in the pricing card is checked or not. Okay, so if the input box is checked, then we want to apply this class. So this is kind of this is kind of making our life a lot easier. We do not even have to do any kind of JavaScript. We do not have to write that. We can simply use the CSS to do a lot of things. Now let me tell you that in modern times, CSS has become so advanced that a lot of things that you do with JavaScript can be easily done with this CSS in many situations. For example, building menu bar, navigation bar, etc. So these things can be done using CSS. So this is how you can use has property. Now let's try to understand this very important concept of subgrids. Okay, so in CSS you also have grids and subgrids. Okay, so let's say I have this div, and here I'm using grid on this div. So I have 3 columns, and we have inner divs which has a class called card, and I've applied this grid property on that div. Okay, so each of these divs have this display grid. Okay, now the thing is here, as you can see, the moment I have this massive title, it is breaking my layout. So how I am going to fix this? Now right now these 2 divs, the inner and outer divs, are behaving like 2 separate grids. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this inner div aligned with the parent div. And how I'm going to do that? I'm going to use CSS subgrids. So first of all, in order to do that, what we are going to do, we are going to first make sure that this row, first, second and third, this middle row is taking as much space as it is needed, so that it can expand. and we are only going to assign the minimum content that is needed to fit these images and buttons in the parent div, so that we can have a kind of like area so that this part can actually expand. So what I mean by that is, so let me show you. So for the rows, I'm going to just say auto 1fr auto. Okay, now what this means is this image is going to take only the required number of space it is needed to fit, and same for the button. But for this middle text title, I'm going to let it use the all free space that is there. Okay, so I'm going to let it expand. This is like the simplest way to understand this. So if the box has 600 pixel, if the button is only 10 pixel and the image is of only 10 pixel, the rest of the space will be used by this this title. So this is what it means. Now for the child, right now I'm just using grid. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the parent template rows so that I can actually align these things. So when we say grid template rows, and when we say subgrid, what this is doing, this is using the parent row to expand itself. It is mapping the parent tracks in order to align itself. But right now, as you can see, we only have this read button. So what this is doing, this is using only that a specific row, but we need to use all the row. We need to span it across the entire row so that everything can be visible. So to do that, I'm going to use this row, and I'm going to spread it across the 3 rows that we had in the parent, so that it can actually use the entire 3 tracks and everything is visible. Now, as you can see, the issue that we had about the buttons, that issue is gone. Okay, so that issue is not appearing anymore. So this is how you can use CSS subgrids to fix some layout issues in case you are using parents and children as grids. So sometimes you will come across these issues, and if you are already familiar with subgrids, you can actually fix those issues. And it's not like you should be limited by grids. You can also use other approach to fix this issue. Okay, so just try to understand that many people do not practice subgrids, and many people get confused when it comes to using advanced grid layouts. So this is something that you need to practice, and only after practice you will have some understanding of how to use those grids. Okay, and in case you are not familiar with CSS grids, just try to watch my another video where I have talked about CSS grids and CSS text boxes in depth. Now let's try to understand a new concept, and this is quite new if you are a beginner, because this is not something that you will be using that often, but this is something that you should be aware of in case you need it in some situations. Okay, so this concept is called container queries. Okay, you must be familiar with media queries. So let's try to understand what container queries are. So let's say I have this sidebar, I have this user profile, and I have image, name, and this paragraph. So here I have defined width 600 pixel, border, user profile, flex row, and this. And then in the media query, I have written max width 500 pixels. So that means that up to 500 pixel, we want the flex direction to be column. Otherwise, it should be in row. So if I am expanding this, it is becoming row. Okay. Now, what container queries are? Let me tell you that in media query, this width that you are calculating, it is the width of the browser. Okay, so it is analyzing according to the browser's width. So as the browser width changes, based on that, this flex property is being applied. If it is less than equal to 500 pixel, it is applying column. Otherwise, it is applying row. Okay. Now, container queries are queries that kind of you can say here we are using browser width. In the container queries, we use the nearest elements width. Okay, so right now in the sidebar, in this sidebar div, I have this user profile. So instead of calculating the this decision, this user profile direction to be in column, like flex direction should be in column or row, instead of using the browser width, what I can do, I can use the sidebar width, and I can use that as a measure to apply this design decision whether to use row or whether to use column. Okay, so in order to do that, first of all I need to define container type on this specific element, which is like you can say the parent element. So I'm going to use this inline size. Inline size is nothing but the width. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace this media with the container. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Now this is called the container query. What this does is, like this is going to use this property, flex direction property, based on the parent size. Okay, so let me show you what this means. So as you can see right now, this is not changing. Okay, so this is not changing. Why? Because it has stopped using the browser's width. Now it is using the parent's width. So the moment I'm going to reduce the parent's width, so here if I reduce it to 400 pixel, the moment I reduced it, notice this container property is being applied, this flex direction is being applied. But the moment I'm going to exceed beyond 500, that's a 700, then this property is being applied. Okay. Now let me tell you that you must be wondering that how is this useful? How can we use this container query? Okay, so let me tell you that when you are building sidebars, when you're building some kind of like components on your websites, in some situations you do not want to use browsers width. You do not want to do that. You want to use the parent size to see if the element is fitting on that box or inside that parent or not. So accordingly you want to change the size of that element. Okay, so this is where container queries are helpful, and this is something that you should be using instead of using the browser size if you are only dependent on the parent size for like making the inner elements responsive. So try to use container queries. They are similar to media queries. They have no fundamental difference. All you have to do is define the container type on the parent element or the nearest element according to which you want to define, and use this inline size. Now you can also use size, and here you size simply means like height and width. Okay, but inline size means just width. Okay, so just try to use it, and here you can use the height property or width property if you are using size there. Okay, and this is all you need to know about this container property. Now let's try to understand our final concept, and this is quite important when you are working with various libraries, and this is where the concept of layer comes in. So let me tell you what I mean. For example, right now I have this button, and right now I have this button class and this button class. Okay, and this is green. Why it is green? It's because both of them have the same specificity score. So the browser like it checks which one comes later, and like this button is coming later after this button, then it is going to give it higher importance. That's why it is making my button green. Okay, now let's say I want it to appear as blue. Okay, and this is a very simplified example in like in libraries. Whenever you are working with different libraries and whenever you are working on complex projects, you will realize the importance of layers. Okay, now in order to fix that issue of priorities, what browsers should prioritize, what you can do, you can arrange things in cascading layers. So let me tell you what I mean. So first of all, you have to define layer, and the layer can have different names. So let's say this is blue and this is gray. Okay, now this blue will have less importance because it is coming before green, and green will have higher importance. If I want blue to have higher importance, then I'm going to put it after blue, after green. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to like use this blue, and then I'm going to copy paste this thing. Let's make it layer blue, and I'm going to do this. Okay, in the same way for this green one, I'm going to define this. Right, let's define this. Now notice that now notice that right now the button is becoming blue. Why? It's because in the layer we have defined blue later on. Okay, even though in this CSS file, as we can see, this blue is appearing here, okay, but green is appearing after that. So simple logic would tell you that the green should be there, but when you are using layers, then layers actually have this rule that at the top of the file you have to define the kind of, you can say, their scores, like which layer you want to give higher priority to. So for example, here I want blue to have higher priority, so I am going to keep blue at the very end, and no matter where I keep this green or blue in the CSS file, it's always going to be blue. So it does not matter what we write here. What matters is before defining these rules here, we have already defined the priorities here, and this way browser understand that I need to use blue for this button. I need to give higher priority to this button. Okay, and now this is a very simplified example. If you are working with Tailwind CSS, if you are working with like frameworks on a like bigger projects, you will understand the importance of this thing, because sometimes some libraries come with really optimized high specificity kind of their classes are defined in that manner. So you can actually define your own and give priority to your own. Okay, so this is how you can work with CSS layers. So just try to understand about these things, and if you have any other question, feel free to ask me in the comment section, and make sure to subscribe to this channel so that I can keep posting such interesting content. Okay, that is all for this video. Have a nice day. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, and just visit my website in case you are interested in learning machine learning, or if you want to purchase the notes related to ML and data science.